Alright, in this video, let's look at some of the factors that determine the price elasticity of demand that goods and services will have. So we're going to look at certain factors that will impact whether a good has either inelastic or elastic demand. And this again is in response to price change, how responsive consumers will be when the prices of the goods and services that they buy change. So the first one we're going to look at, first factor, and we're going to talk about four of them here, is this idea of necessity versus a luxury. So whether or not this good is a necessity or a luxury to a consumer is going to impact how elastic consumers' demand is, or how responsive that they will be to a price change. And if you think about it in terms of a couple examples. Vacations versus medication. A vacation is going to be likely more of a luxury item. People can live without it. It is nice to go on and nice to have the opportunity to take a vacation. However, if a situation where a price increase in a vacation takes place, it's usually probably one of the first things that's going to disappear from a consumer's budget. However, medication, again, we're talking about price increase in this situation. If prices increase on a necessity, a necessary medication, like insulin for a diabetic or an EpiPen for somebody with an allergy, demand is not really going to change just because of the sheer necessity that these goods and services have. Likewise, if price goes down, if price decreases, consumers are not going to stock up on a bunch of EpiPens, as I use this example a lot. They expire, and you don't really need additional ones until they've been used. So regardless of which direction price changes, our demand is going to be inelastic. We're not really going to change our quantity that we're purchasing. Where vacations might be a little different. If we see a large price decrease on a vacation, it's more likely to encourage consumers say, "Oh, okay, well let's go on the vacation. Now's an opportunity to go and do that." So necessity versus luxury is the first determining factor, and this is going to be subjective. It's different for everybody. What's a necessity for some might be a luxury to others, and vice versa. The second factor is going to be availability of substitutes. So how many other available options are there that can fill this same need? Good way to think about availability of substitutes here is the more substitutes that are available, okay, the more substitutes and options consumers have, the more price elastic demand will be. So more substitutes, more elastic. Fewer substitutes, less elastic. And that relates to our kind of our previous example as well. There's not a lot of good substitutes for a diabetic other than their insulin, right? So fewer substitutes, less elastic, more inelastic. And another thing to think about when we talk about substitutes is how goods are defined. So the more widely they're defined, or general, that's a better word. The more general they're defined, the more elastic. So to kind of explain what I mean here is, let's just use the example of a car. Now, a car is very generally, very widely defined. There's all kinds of different cars, different options, different sizes, different, coupes, sedans, brands, you name it. This is a very general definition, and there are a lot of substitutes when it comes to, there are not a lot of substitutes when it comes to a substitute for a car. Okay, there's just not a lot of substitutes. So demand for a car is probably going to be generally inelastic. Not a lot of good substitutes for personal transportation other than a car. If you define this very specifically, the opposite of generally, let's just say a Toyota Camry. A Toyota Camry has a lot of substitutes. You could go to a Honda Accord, Nissan Maxima, and on down the line. There's a bunch of different options or substitutes for a Toyota Camry, making it more elastic, right? More substitutes, more elastic. Not a lot of substitutes for a car, inelastic. Quite a few substitutes for a specifically defined car, like a Toyota Camry, making it elastic, have lots of other options. Okay, so something to think about. More substitutes, more elastic; fewer substitutes, less elastic. The third, what portion of income does this product's price represent? So why does this factor make a difference? Try to give you an example here. My daughter, being home here, cooped up, not be able to do, she loves to bake. She told me, Dad, you need to go to the dollar store and get me some salt for, I don't know what she was making, it doesn't matter. But I went and picked up a thing of salt, and it cost me 99 cents. Okay? I'm not rich, but 99 cents is not something that is really going to put me out. Very small portion of my monthly budget. So, if salt were to increase in price by 100%, okay, go from 99 cents up to $2. Okay, and I went to the store and I was looking for salt. The fact that it went from 99 cents to $2, I am probably not going to bat an eye. I'm just going to get the salt. I need the salt, and it is not going to impact my demand. Okay, because it's such a small portion of my budget, it makes demand more inelastic. So the smaller the portion of our budget, the more inelastic demand tends to be. We're not going to change our responsiveness to it. Now let's take a larger, let's say I was looking at a new car. And this new car cost me, or was, when I looked one time, it was $30,000. Now, a 100% increase in a car, okay, going from $30,000 to $60,000, that's going to be a deal breaker immediately. That's going to be, it's going to make my demand very elastic. I mean, very responsive to that price change. Even a small price change, going up 10%, right, going from 30,000 up to 33,000, a 10% increase, $3,000 is a significant amount of money. So the larger the portion of our budget, the more elastic, the more responsive, right, we will be to price changes. Okay, small items, they can increase in a significant percentage in price. It's not going to change our quantity demanded just because it's no big deal. It's $1. Okay. And the last one, the last factor we're going to talk about is time. We call this the period of adjustment. The longer the period of adjustment, the more time consumers have to adjust, right, the more elastic demand tends to be. So demand, we say, is more elastic in the long run. Consumers have more time, okay, they're able to adjust, and they can find other substitutes, and they can adjust their behavior. I'll try to give you an example of that. When I bought my first house, I bought a house in New Ulm, and I was driving to Winthrop every day. My wife was driving to Gibbon every day to work, so we were putting on significant miles every day just to get to work. And with all those miles, right, comes significant investment in gasoline. 2008, price of gasoline went to over $4 a gallon in Minnesota, and it was a crushing on my wife and I's budget to have to drive that much. So when gas goes up to I think I remember it being 408 in Winthrop, Gas goes up to 408. In the short run, we really don't have a lot of options. We can't not go to work. We can't like reduce our mileage really quickly. We just have to continue to just cut back in other areas. Over time, however, we have more options to adjust to this, and then our demand for gas becomes, right, in the short run, right, was inelastic. We have not a lot of options, but in the long run, becomes more elastic. We are able to respond to this. For instance, in the long run, some of the decisions we made. I was driving a Trailblazer. Traded that off. I bought a Chevy HHR. Trailblazer got like 16 miles to the gallon. That was a big extended one with the V8 in it, and 16 miles a gallon on the highway, like 12 in town. Went to HHR, gets 32 on the highway, 25 in town. Okay, less demand over time. Another, we moved. So we moved back to Winthrop. Now this is something, all right, gas prices go up on Tuesday, you're not moving Thursday. It's something that took months in order for that to happen. But over time, we were able to adjust our consumption, and our demand for gas became more elastic as we had more time to adjust and to respond to those price changes. Okay, try to give you a couple other examples. You look at this demand curve over time. The more vertical your demand curve is going to be, the more inelastic demand is. So as price changes, you can see here from $1 up to $1.25, there's not a lot of change in the quantity demanded. It's very inelastic. Over time, this demand curve flattens out, and the more horizontal or more flat your demand curve gets, the more responsive or more elastic your demand is, the more you're going to change. So here from $1 to $1.25, so this is our demand in a week, inelastic. Here's our demand over a month. Maybe in a month we bought that new car, right? And in a year's time, we're able to move and move closer. Now our demand is even more elastic. Okay, so that's demand becomes more elastic over time. We see the demand curve flattening. Some examples of price elasticities. Remember these values. Anything less than 1 is inelastic. Anything over 1 is elastic. So these are in our textbook, like elasticity of electricity. In the short run, there's no options. I mean, electricity is about all you have to run your television and run your, if you got electric heat, or turn your lights on. But over time, it can become more elastic, right? Maybe we put high efficiency light bulbs in. Maybe we get new appliances that are high efficiency. We can invest in new technology that saves us and makes us more efficient. Okay? Gasoline, this is the one I was talking about in the short run, very inelastic. It has a value of 0.4. In the long run, 1.5. Right? You can move. You can get a new job. You can reduce your consumption over time. Right? So you can kind of see how these in the short run are going to have a lower value. Going to be more inelastic in the short run, more elastic over time. Hope that helps.